You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron, live with Athan Hristodulu.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to the Greeks Gridiron. I am Athan Hristodulu. It is November 8th, 2021. Week 9 is just about wrapped up. We got the Monday night game tonight between the Chicago Bears and the Pittsburgh Steelers, but I am doing my weekly Week 9 recap with you guys. We'll talk about all the games that just went on this past Sunday, break them down a little bit, kind of talk about my thoughts and takeaways, and then we'll see where everyone stands as we get ready for week number 10. We're a little bit more than halfway through the season now. Actually, no, just about halfway through the season at this point now because we have 18 weeks now. So, without further ado, two things to talk to you guys about before we get going. Firstly, I've opened up an email for you guys to email in questions, things that you want to see answered on the show. So if anyone has anything you want to ask me, feel free to shoot down an email to me. It's down in the description below. It is thegreeksgridiron@gmail.com. You can do fan questions there. Ask me some stuff, and you'll see it answered live on the show. The second thing, I know that this video is pretty long, so if you're looking for your specific team's games, I will have them written and timestamps down in the bottom of the description as well. So if you're looking for your team and you don't really want to watch the whole thing, feel free to find your team's discussion down below. Now, let's get into the discussion of these games. Some wild results, and this first one I think is definitely no exception. Cleveland absolutely whacking Cincinnati at home at that in what was a really surprising game. There was so much drama going around with the Browns and Odell Beckham leaving. And, you know, despite what happened to the Bengals last week, a lot of people expect you to know with everything going on in Cleveland, this might be a pretty solid game for them to just be able to knock down their AFC divisional rival and then move on from there. However, that was not the case. Started with the Bengals pick 6, 99 yards. Unbelievable. I was watching as it happened, and I could not believe the end result of that initial drive. Then from there, things just really did not get much better for the Cincinnati Bengals. I mean, Joe Burrow had 282 yards, but a couple of interceptions to go with it. This was probably his worst game as a pro, in my opinion, just because of the fact that he had like back-breaking, drive-killing picks. On top of that, the offense as a whole just really struggled. They could not really protect Burrow. 5 sacks. There was 3 committed turnovers overall for the entire team. And then on top of that, when you look at the numbers here for downs, 3 of 11 on third down, and they also went for it twice on fourth down and could not finish off the drive there either. So just offensively, they were a complete mess. Defensively, they could not stop the Browns, who were just on a complete head of steam going from start to finish in this game. You want to talk about the Browns capitalizing on the turnovers, scoring either during the turnover or directly right after the turnover. Baker Mayfield was very accurate targeting, I think it was 8 different receivers at least 5 times. The guy was dishing out the ball to everybody. Did not seem like he missed Odell Beckham in the slightest. And then on top of that, let's shout out Nick Chubb. The dude, after having like a pretty tough comeback game last week, came out and just completely rolled over the Bengals defense. Dude had 14 carries, 137 yards, 2 touchdowns, rumbling through the Bengals defense. And then when you look at what the defense themselves did for Cleveland, I mean, Myles Garrett had a sack and a half. Cornerback Troy Hill had a couple of sacks himself. John Johnson, he had a pick and a forced fumble. I mean, whether it was turnovers, sacks, or just straight up stopping the Bengals offense, this Browns defense could do no wrong in this game. The Browns dominated. Things are looking good for them as they go forward. I'm very curious to see how this team operates minus Odell. It almost feels like because of Beckham's presence, they felt like they needed to go to him, and now without him, things are just opened up. Baker Mayfield can operate the offense the way he wants to, and to be honest with you guys, I think the Browns are better off with Odell. They're 8-4 without Odell, and I think it's like 13-15 with him, something along those lines. I think Cleveland is in a much better place post-Odell Beckham. Now, second game, we're talking, like you wanted to talk about just wild upsets or just like shocking results. The Broncos, the defense week in and week out, all year long, has just been dominant, to say the least. I mean, they've been really good. It's the offense has kind of been holding this team back. You want to talk about a statement game where you have the opportunity to show up and show out. You are at Dallas, complete underdog. I don't think anyone really expected the Broncos to win this game, especially considering the offensive struggles they've had, and it just did not matter. Running back Javonte Williams killed it. He had 17 carries, 111 yards. Melvin Gordon killed it, 21 carries, 80 yards, and a touchdown. This game went through the running backs. Offensively, the Broncos, I think, really need to start considering focusing more on like more of a run first, pass second type of offense. Their running backs, Melvin Gordon's a solid running back. Javonte Williams is showing that he has promise as well. I think they need to, basically work to Teddy Bridgewater's strengths, which I hate calling him a game manager, but when you are not putting the world on his shoulders, it seems like the end result ends up being pretty good for this offense. I mean, there was so many good things going on for Denver in this game, and I just cannot praise them enough in like a wild fashion as well, pulling out the win the way they did. Nobody saw this coming. Tim Patrick, dude, 4 catches, 85 yards, and a beautiful 44-yard touchdown pass from Teddy Bridgewater. And then the defense, man. Talk about absolutely dominating the ground game. The Cowboys going into this game were averaging 152 yards per game, and they allowed only 78. This was Dak Prescott's comeback game off the injury, and it should have been a big game for him. Going up against Denver's defense, who's been pretty good so far this year, maybe even great. Maybe you expected it not to be quite the offensive performance, but to just have what transpired in this game. Prescott had 2 touchdowns, but he had a pick as well. Only 48.7% completion percentage. That talk about it's funny because and I'm not trying to single out Dak Prescott for this, because a lot of the MVP candidates, or pretty much all of them this week, because Tom Brady wasn't playing, is probably the only outlier in this, and Lamar Jackson, who stormed back, and we'll talk about that later. All the MVP candidates this week struggled. And if you watch my MVP video, I did have an honorable mention to Myles Garrett, and he's probably the only guy out of everyone that I talked about in that list that had a great game, aside from Lamar Jackson, who, to be fair, struggled early, but then really stormed back and took things over towards the end of that game. And again, we'll get to that later. But, I mean, just talk about a wild game. And then on top of that, the defense allowing 190 yards rushing. And this was one of the better run defenses in the league. They were only allowing 88.3 coming into this game. I don't know what the hell happened. I really don't. But shout out to Denver coming into Dallas prepared to make a statement against an NFC contender, one that a lot of people were starting to argue was the best team in the league, and one that I was definitely considering as one of the best. But man, you come in, you throw a mean, just right hook and knock a contender like that on the ground. If they can build off of this, Denver has a really talented roster. They just got rid of Von Miller because they're so confident in their unit. The linebacker Chubb, he's coming back soon. I mean, there's a lot to like about this Denver team as long as they're playing smart football offensively. I think they need to continue to lean on the running backs. As for Dallas, I mean, where to go from here, I don't really know. You had 290 yards of offense after averaging 454 a game coming into this one. Do some soul searching and just move on to the next week. That was a pretty wild result. I did not expect what happened this past weekend to happen. Pretty crazy game, and again, just move on, next game on. Just do not look back in the rearview mirror, because that was quite an ugly one. Next up, we have the Texans and the Miami Dolphins. Kind of a dud of a game, not a ton really going on. Tua was not the starter going into this one, and I really thought that gave the Texans a good opportunity, especially with Tyrod Taylor coming back to maybe pull out a big win here, an upset win at that. But just talk about an ugly game from both sides, and Jacoby Brissett basically did enough to win this game for the Dolphins here. 244 yards, a touchdown, 2 interceptions, and a fumble. So the guy had 3 turnovers, and somehow the Texans did not capitalize on that and couldn't find the end zone. I will shout out Miami's defense, though. They look pretty solid. 5 sacks, 3 interceptions, giving the Texans nightmares all game long offensively. And then Miami's offense somehow managed to win this game despite totaling 5 turnovers and only having 47 rushing yards on 25 carries. Again, this was an ugly game offensively for both of these teams. It really just felt like they were trying to outdo each other and see who could play this game worse. As for the Texans side of things, I mean, I was excited for Tyrod Taylor coming back. He has been really good, just like in the opportunities he's had to start. And I thought, this offense has been definitely not good, but like serviceable with Davis Mills at times. I figured bringing in a pro like Tyrod Taylor, and now he's being able to start coming off his injury, maybe this offense could actually get something going. You know, they have Brandon Cooks. And no, I mean, Taylor had 240 yards and 3 interceptions. I could not believe this game as it was unfolding. Struggling on third down, they were 6 for 17. They had 4 turnovers themselves. The defense did manage 4 sacks, a handful of turnovers, but ultimately just this game really boiled down to whose offense was going to play worse, and I guess it was the Texans in this one. Ugly game for both of these teams. Not really much you can take away if you're the Dolphins. You can't really be too thrilled from this. Hopefully Tua is able to come back and play next week. For the Texans, I mean, you're just continuing to kind of trudge along in what is a completely lost season, and at this point, you're just looking forward to 2022. Next up, we have the Falcons taking on, I'm discussing to you guys, taking on the New Orleans Saints. This was a pretty wild one towards the end of the game. It was pretty much all Falcons all game long up until the fourth quarter, and then the Saints just started doing this wild comeback thing, which for anyone who's been following the Falcons as of the last few years, it's kind of been an MO of theirs to lose a game in that sort of a fashion, but shout out to Atlanta. They were able to squeak out the last-second field goal win. Matt Ryan was able to drop a dime to Cordero Patterson for 64 yards to ultimately set up the Young Ho Koo field goal kick. Matt Ryan, when he's on, is on. He showed just this week, especially against a good Saints defense that's been playing pretty well so far this year, he still has the ability to put up the numbers, 343 yards, 2 touchdowns. He had a rushing touchdown at that. I don't even remember the last time he ran something in. Cordero Patterson continues his like wild emergence out of nowhere after, being in the league and a lot of high hopes when he first came in, and now he's just playing like the athlete role, like he was calling it. He's like, if my mom could work 5 different jobs, I could work 5 different positions if I need to. 6 catches, 126 yards, great game for him. The connection between him and Matt Ryan is undeniable, and it's really exciting, especially considering the loss of Calvin Ridley last week. Now you're trying to find somebody to step up, and Cordero Patterson's already been having a great year and only continues to improve upon it week in and week out. The running game, though, was probably the big question mark coming out of this one. Where the heck it went, I don't know. 25 carries for 34 yards. That is not a recipe for success. That'll be something that the Falcons need to look at addressing as they move forward, because the Falcons are there's a lot of NFC teams that are just kind of like on the playoff bubble, and if the Falcons really want to contend, they need to figure out the running game there, because that is not how you're going to be winning December and January football. I do want to shout out the Saints, though. Tough last-second loss at home. You have Trevor Siemian starting. Obviously, things did not go well. 249 yards for Siemian, 2 touchdowns. Didn't catch the win, though, at the very end there. Crushing loss. Kamara, 50 yards rushing and a touchdown, and also had 4 receptions for 54 yards receiving as well. Secondary was just, I'm really surprised at how this game went, because the Saints have been really good defensively this year. They just gave Brady and the Bucs a real tough time last week. I expected them to be able to do something similar to Matt Ryan, but ultimately it's starting to look like while this defense can come out with some big games and has like frustrated some really good quarterbacks, they are letting up a ton of yardage the more you look at it. Last week it was like 375 yards for Brady. This week 343 for Matt Ryan. The only difference between the two quarterbacks was Brady put up 4 passing touchdowns. Ryan had 3, 2 passing, 1 rushing, but Brady had 2 picks and Matt Ryan had none. So without the opportunistic plays, without the turnovers, it really burned the Saints in this one. And obviously you're fighting an uphill battle because you have Trevor Siemian at quarterback now. You were not expecting something like this. However, it's just a little bit shocking to see the defense start to kind of fold over against some of the better quarterbacks of the league, which I would consider Matt Ryan still one of the higher up quarterbacks in the league. Maybe he's not quite what he used to be numbers wise, but he is still a really good quarterback, and you don't just put up 340 some odd yards and score 3 touchdowns if you're not good. But interesting game to say the least. Tough one for New Orleans. Atlanta, I don't really know what to make of them at this point. I really don't. They lose weird games. They win weird games. I don't know. You tell me, Falcons fans. Next game we are discussing, this was a pretty surprising result in my opinion. I don't know if other people saw that the same way, but I was pretty shocked to see the Giants be able to come out on this one winners, just with all the offensive struggles they've had, the defense not really showing up, and the Raiders have been putting up numbers. Obviously, the loss of Henry Ruggs That's going to be something that completely changes this offense going forward. They did sign Deshaun Jackson after that game, so maybe that is something that, will at least somewhat address the issue with the loss of speed and Henry Ruggs and whatnot. But I mean, Carr still had he put up a lot of numbers. Some bad picks, 2 of them at that. He only had a touchdown, 296 yards though. Darren Waller, 7 catches, 92 yards. The offense was able to total up 406 yards. So it's not like they weren't able to move the ball. A couple of bad picks obviously kind of killed them with the turnovers. They also had a fumble as well. The defense, good pass defense, like bad rushing defense, I guess you could say, because what is it? Daniel Jones had 110 yards passing, but then they let up 149 yards on the ground. I mean, so it's like a mixed bag with the Raiders here. Defensively, did they play well? Did they play bad? I mean, when you look at one area, they played really well. The other area, they did not. So, I mean, mixed bag for the Raiders. I think that after this week, bringing Deshaun Jackson in, obviously you had the surprise loss of Henry Ruggs with that. Things are going to be shifted around a little bit. Maybe going forward they'll be fine. I don't know. Obviously, the Raiders have dealt with so much drama this year, and I mean, shout out to them for even being in the thick of the AFC playoff race like they are. Hopefully, this doesn't derail them, or they're not. They're able to continue to power through more adversity and move on. Tough loss though for the Giants. I cannot believe putting up 245 yards. You were able to win the game. Obviously, with the turnovers, winning the turnover battle, that helps you out. Devin Booker, 21 carries, 99 yards. Like I mentioned before, Daniel Jones had 110 yards passing and a touchdown. You don't normally win games when your offense is barely able to travel 2.5 football fields. Again, they won more so because of the defense than anything, I would say. Shout out to the defense, I guess. But interesting place for the Giants. Interesting win for the Giants. I really don't know what to make of this result either, because this is a game where I did not expect the Raiders to lose this one despite the loss of their wide receiver, and I did not expect the Giants to really be able to come out with a win on this one, but somehow they did. So big shout out to you Giants fans. Lost season, I don't know, maybe lost season at this point, I don't know, but a surprising win to say the least. Next up, we're looking at the Patriots and the Panthers, and this was kind of a result I'm not really surprised about. At this point, Sam Darnold is not the answer for the Panthers, and I hope that they can figure something out soon. Sam Darnold's line here of numbers, 172 yards, 3 interceptions, and a whopping 48.5% completions. Things are not looking good. The wide receivers on top of that are really not helping him out, and were practically non-factors in this game. Chuba Hubbard had 33 yards receiving, and Christian McCaffrey had 54, which was literally half of their receiving yards. I think, what does that total out to? 87, and the other 85 was from the rest of the receivers. You're not going to win football games when you are literally relying on your running backs to do everything for you. I don't know what the heck's going on between Sam Darnold and his wide receivers and that offense as a whole, but like them putting up single-digit scores is like becoming a thing now. And on top of that, Sam Darnold, he's 23 years old, young quarterback still. Matt Rule, what is a second-year head coach? Something like that. It was a recipe for disaster. You're going up against Belichick, an offense and defense that have steadily improved week in and week out. Belichick feasts on the inexperience, and this is the second week in a row that has kind of been the theme. It happened last week. It happened this week. The Patriots, though, they're looking really good. I'm definitely impressed with what they are doing. Mac Jones, 139 yards, a touchdown and interception. Another lesser game from him, but the game plan seemed to be to run the football more so than anything else. Obviously, the secondary in Carolina is stacked, and their pass defense is really good, to say the least. J.C. Jackson, though, big game for him. 2 interceptions and a touchdown, off one of them being a pick six. He was Darnold's most effective target, it seemed like. He had the most yards and had a receiving touchdown at that. And then the defense also did a pretty solid job containing Christian McCaffrey in his return. 106 yards total, no scores, nothing like that. I think that's about as good of a game as you can get from trying to defend Christian McCaffrey, who is an elite player and can be just so dangerous when he is on the football field. Overall, this is a great team win for the Patriots. Offense played solid. Defense played solid, to great, if you want to say that. Ultimately, though, the Panthers, man, they have got to figure something out, the quarterback situation, and I'm assuming there is going to be a quarterback heading their way via either trade, free agency, or the draft this year going into the offseason. I cannot believe that they picked up Sam Darnold's 5th-year option, because I think they're on the table now for like $18 million, is what it is for his 5th-year option. So I have no idea how they're going to figure that out. Good luck to them, but it does not seem like Sam Darnold is going to be the answer over there in Carolina. Whether you want to attribute some of the issues with the wide receivers as well or not, I, at this point, do not lean on Christian McCaffrey is the best thing they can do. Next up, this was probably the absolute most wild result of the day, and when I did the preview for this week, I literally said that there was, and I barely even discussed this game because I was like, there's no shot that the Bills lose this game. You want to talk about a trap game and falling into that trap game and literally dying to said trap. I cannot believe the end result for this game. Jacksonville's defense, outstanding. The offense, not great. Trevor Lawrence got hurt for a little bit. He was out. But the defense, man, Josh Allen was able to put up 314 yards. He had a couple of interceptions. He had a fumble. The other Josh Allen on the Jaguars defense was a nightmare for him. Intercepted him, forced a fumble, and also like this everything. Sacks, fumbles, pick, you name it. Josh Allen from the Jaguars took down Josh Allen from the Bills for sure. The defense did fine. They did a great job keeping the Jaguars offense in check, so I do want to shout out them. 218 yards, couple of sacks. They allowed 9 points. Great for the Buffalo Bills defense. They got to figure something out with the run game. There is concern with the running game. I feel like there are some weeks where the run game disappears. You had 72 yards rushing on offense for the Bills, and Josh Allen accounted for 50 yards of that run game. That is not good. Your running backs cannot account for 22 yards of rushing in the game. That is definitely something they're going to need to address. This was something I talked about during the offseason about the Bills, during the lead up to the draft, during free agency, as we got into training camp, and it's popped up a few times now at this point where it does not seem like, it seems like sometimes, okay, yeah, maybe they did address the run game and they're working on it. They're getting better at it. Then there's games like this where Josh Allen is your leading rusher and he has 50 yards and the rest of the offense has 22. That is not a recipe for success. And this is probably going to be the glaring issue for the Bills going forward, is their inability to run the football. Meanwhile, for the Jaguars, the defense was excellent. Holding the running backs to 22 yards. Obviously, Josh Allen got his 50. 4 sacks. They forced 3 turnovers. The defense played great from start to finish. Josh Allen did great. I think, with all the Josh Allen discussion going on, it was a goofy day for Twitter and whatnot. I saw a lot of people making Josh Allen jokes, and I feel like I've said that name 100 times now. But great game by him. The offense, though, Trevor Lawrence, 118 yards, 57% completion percentage, struggled, left the game after getting hurt. He came back in, though, and he was fine, but ultimately this offense is just continuing to struggle. I still cannot believe that the Jaguars have won this game. Like, as I'm talking about this, I'm still in disbelief. I also think one of the funniest things that came out of this just oddball game was the fact that Matthew Wright managed to miss 3 consecutive field goal tries after a couple of penalties pulled back the first 2 to the left each and every single time. That was probably one of the wildest things I saw in that game. The game from start to finish was just bizarre. It was weird, full of ineffective offensive play, turnovers, you name it. It wasn't like it wasn't even like a defensive game. It was just a poorly executed game offensively for both sides. But Jaguars got the win. Shout out to you, Jaguars fans. You must be excited about that one. More importantly, to the Jaguars team. Wild game is all I can really say. Next up, this one, the total opposite, an absolute barn burner of a game that went all the way into overtime that saw the Ravens battle back again. At this point, there is no deficit too large for the Ravens to overcome. There was a point where it was 24-10. The Vikings had just returned a kickoff, and you really thought, man, the Ravens, they're another tough loss for them. But no, Lamar Jackson basically threw the team over his shoulders and said, we have to win this game. We cannot lose. And I mean, quite a way to win. Slow start offensively, but 500 total yards of offense, 253 from passing, 247 yards from rushing. Jackson accounted for a whopping 386 yards of total offense on his own. Defensively, the Ravens, they struggled a little bit. They let up some really big plays. And why I say they struggled a little bit is because they let up a couple of big plays. There was the 50-yard touchdown pass from Jefferson. I think Dalvin Cook had like a 66-yard run as well. But outside of that, they didn't really let up too much. Kirk Cousins, he had 187 yards. He had a couple of passing touchdowns and a rushing touchdown, but they held the Vikings offense in check. The scoreline obviously was 34-31, but you can pull a touchdown away from the Vikings because it came off of that return. As for the Vikings, I mean, just talk about another heartbreaking loss for them. This is like the 5th game now, it feels like, this year that has come down to the absolute wire, and they've come out on the losing end 3 times of those 5 really, really tight games. I really think the offense should have done more with their 2 interceptions. They were only able to put up 3 points from those 2 turnovers, and if they're able to put up anything more, they prevent themselves from losing this game. That's probably where the biggest piece of this loss comes to fruition, is with the inability to just do anything with these turnovers they're forcing. And like I talked about this last week, it seems like one part of the team shows up and the other one doesn't. Either the offense plays really well or the defense doesn't. The defense plays really well, the offense doesn't. This was kind of a mix of both, but I would say that the offense kind of let down the D a little bit here. Like I said, you're only getting 3 points off of 2 really big turnovers you needed. They were absolutely killing the Ravens at one point. It felt like the game almost felt like a complete loss for the Ravens, but then once the offense stopped playing really well, the defense started to play poorly. I don't know. It was like a mixed bag. Offense was playing kind of well. Defense was playing offense. I don't know. It was a mixed bag. Some points the offense is playing well. Some points the defense is playing well. And then vice versa. There is just so much inconsistency with this Vikings team. I don't really know what to make of them. Tough loss last week to the Cowboys. Another tough loss here to the Ravens. I had a lot of Vikings fans telling me that this team was leaps and bounds better than the Packers, and not the case. Not the case at all. There's just too much inconsistency with this team, because there are some weeks the offense looks great, there are some weeks the defense looks great, and then there's other weeks where both units just don't know. It doesn't seem like they know what's going on. I don't know. Unfortunate loss. Ravens got a big one here, a win they needed too to keep themselves in the thick of the AFC playoff race. The Vikings continuing to fall into more of the obscurity of the bottom part of the NFC. For the next one, we have the Chargers and the Eagles. This was a game that kind of went exactly how I expected it to. The Eagles passing game struggled against the Chargers passing defense. Meanwhile, the Chargers run defense struggled against the Eagles run offense. When you look at what the Chargers did, they were able to snap their little losing streak they had going on there, which is good for them. This is a team that I expect to probably make the playoffs still, more on the lower sided seeded probably. I don't think that, I mean, they could win the AFC West potentially. It's kind of up in the air at this point. The Chiefs now finally getting a win and trying to get back correct their issues. Meanwhile, the Raiders just dropped the game. The Chargers won a game. So, I mean, I don't know. The AFC West is very much so still up in the air. The Broncos obviously just beat the Cowboys. Still very much up in the air. But Keenan Allen had a pretty good game. 12 catches, 144 yards. Justin Herbert played amazing. 84.2% completions, 356 yards, 2 touchdowns passing, 1 rushing. Played really well. And like I said, the defense did a good job holding the Eagles offensively through the air. It was just that run D that continues to be an issue. 176 yards on the ground, 2 touchdowns. A game that honestly should not have been this close just because of the lack of passing attack that the Eagles had. The run D needs to get sorted out, because when you get into that late year football where everyone's running the football more because, the cold weather, the snow, whatever it may be, if you can't stop the run, you're not going to win playoff games. You are not going to make it to the Super Bowl. I don't care if it's a passing league. You have to be able to stop the run. You have to. That is 50% of the game still. Whether people throw more or not, it does not matter. Half that defense is being committed to stopping the run, and the Chargers just cannot do that right now. When you look at the Eagles, honestly, their biggest issue is their inability to just establish a passing attack. Devontae Smith, I just want to throw that out there. Dude's playing great. Another great game for him. 5 catches, 116 yards, touchdown. Continues to impress me. I know a lot of people had a lot of concerns about him being so small, but he has shown up and shown out several times for the Eagles this year. Run game was strong again. Boston Scott and Jordan Howard, they're looking really, really good. I like the pairing. They complement each other really, really well. Obviously, with Jalen Hurts on top of that, the run game has become the focal point of this Eagles team. But the big thing, the pass defense getting torched left and right. They were unable to really get any pressure on Justin Herbert, which obviously, if you look at his number line, was very evident of that. No sacks, allowed 356 yards through the air. The pass defense is a problem. On top of that, The inability to really get any sort of like passing offense going is another issue for them. The Eagles are a weird team because they can compete, but defensively, they just can't really seem to stop what is probably the biggest and largest key factor for any successful team so far, like in the last like however many 20 some odd years with passing. That is the whole thing that the league is turning into, a passing league. If you can't do that, you can't really pass yourselves, you can't stop the pass. You can't really expect much from this Eagles team. Next up, we're looking at the Packers and the Chiefs. Poor game offensively. I want to shout out the Packers defense. You're playing against Patrick Mahomes in what has, in recent memory, been a pretty prolific offense, but now, obviously, this year, they're kind of trudging along, trying to figure things out. The defense looked really good, held the Chiefs at bay for the majority of the game. It was just the lack of offense that really hurt the Packers here. Jordan Love, 190 yards, a touchdown, a pick, 55.9% completion percentage. The way he struggled after being able to sit for a year and a half to kind of, learn, grow, and be molded by Matt LaFleur has got to concern the Packers. I think that, you invested so much into getting Jordan Love between upsetting your quarterback, trading compensation to move up to get Jordan Love. He's a year and a half into learning a system that, I'm assuming is pretty complex because Matt LaFleur likes to drop some stuff with Aaron Rodgers. For him to have played as poorly as he did, there were points where he just kind of seemed like he didn't really get what was going on. There has got to be some concern in Green Bay with that. If Rodgers splits at the end of this season and he's somewhere else, is Love going to be able to bring this team forward and continue to win games? Matt LaFleur's had a really good record with Rodgers and this team. I don't really see that continuing if Jordan Love is their quarterback going forward. If you can't put up more than 7 points against a Chiefs defense that has played terribly this year, there is some issues and some concern. When you look at what the Chiefs did, Mahomes, 166 yards, touchdown, 54% completion. I saw some tweets of people saying Patrick Mahomes is back. I don't really think that is a good game to use that reference. It was not a great game by the Chiefs by any means offensively. The Packers defense has been good, not great, and the Chiefs continue to just struggle offensively despite the fact that they have one of the best quarterbacks in the league who's looking less like one of the best and more like one of the better quarterbacks in the league. But Run D allowed 122 yards on the ground with no real passing threat. The struggles just kind of continue for the Chiefs, and at this point are just kind of lucky they didn't have to play Aaron Rodgers this week, because if Aaron Rodgers was playing, this result is very different in my opinion. Next up, we're talking Cardinals and 49ers. Kyle Shanahan, he is probably in trouble at this point. I saw some people talking about this, and I kind of agree. He has got to be on the hot seat at this point. With all the talk of Kyle Shanahan being some brilliant offensive mind, defensively, you allow 437 yards to Colt McCoy, James Conner, and I don't really even know who the wide receivers were for the Cardinals going, because they didn't have A.J. Green or DeAndre Hopkins. I mean, you have Christian Kirk out there, but who else? I don't know who else is there running out there. Andy Isabella, is he still there? I don't know. I don't really know all their wide. Oh, and Moore. He's another one, I guess. But you let Colt McCoy go for 249 yards, a touchdown, and complete 84% of his passes. I don't know what's going on there defensively for the 49ers. There are some issues. Aside from the 2 sacks that they were able to net, the defense looked terrible. Meanwhile, the offensive side of things, 326 yards, couple of touchdowns for Jimmy Garoppolo. He did have a pick. The team overall had 3 turnovers. They had a pair of fumbles as well. 5 sacks allowed. Offensive line did not look great that game. There has got to be some questions as to what's going on. That's all I really have to say about San Francisco. This is a team that has competed with some really good teams and then got blown out by the Cardinals' backup offense, essentially. Meanwhile, when we look at the Cardinals, we already mentioned Colt McCoy, efficient, did a great job. James Conner, dude, talk about having a day. 21 carries, 96 yards, 2 touchdowns on the ground, then 5 catches, 77 yards receiving, and had himself a score there as well. 3 total touchdowns for James Conner, and he's the backup. Shout out to the Cardinals being very well prepared for this game. When I made my predictions, I did pick the Cardinals to win this game. I was not aware of the potential of all these players missing time during the game. Obviously, Edmonds hurt during the game Sunday, but I did not know that they were missing their 2 starting wide receivers, and I did not know that Kyler Murray was not going to play this game. And sure enough, I got lucky enough with the pick anyways, because somehow the 49ers just didn't show up for the game. But shout out to the Cardinals, man, to have depth, to be prepared, to be ready to play through some pretty crazy adversity. They, despite their loss last week, have just put themselves right back into the spot as the best team in the NFC, in my opinion. You're able to overcome a tough loss a tough game like this with so many injuries, and it's one thing to talk about injuries with a team, but when you're talking like starting receivers, running backs, and quarterback, like that is a mess offensively, and they were able to just gather that all up, and they were like, nope, we're fine. Division leaders still, best team in the NFC, especially after the result of this final game we're about to talk about here. Tennessee Titans taking down the Rams in LA 28-16. This was not a shocking win to me because the Titans are good, but more so just because of how poorly the offense played. I want to shout out the Tennessee Titans. I do not want to discredit what the Titans did in this game. I cannot believe the way they were able to just completely unravel this Rams offense. Titans defense was opportunistic. They made some really big plays, couple of interceptions, 5 sacks. They were able to just completely blow through that Rams offensive line. While the defense looked fantastic in this game, and they're like a unit that I've kind of, I've talked about them a lot these last handful of weeks and kind of, looked at them sideways because I don't know if I can believe in them or not. You're able to put up a game like this against the Rams offense. That's a big deal. The big issue that I'm really worried about with Tennessee is the offense. Derrick Henry is now out, obviously, for 6 to 10 weeks minimum. And there's a lot of speculation he might not even be able to make it back for the season, and it sounds like if he does, it'll be a surprise to many. When you look at what the offense did, there is some cause for concern. The defense can't play this great week in and week out. That's just not realistic in this league anymore. So I'll throw that out there, and this is why I'm so concerned. Tannehill, 143 yards passing. He had a touchdown, a pick. He did have a rushing touchdown. It was a little bit up and down throughout the game. Not a ton of yards from him. Receivers were missing as well. I mean, you have A.J. Brown, Julio Jones, and you didn't really get a whole bunch going through the air. Granted, you are playing the Rams defense, one of the best in the league. You're playing Jalen Ramsey, Aaron Donald's there, wreaking havoc in the middle. And once Von Miller gets in there, good luck to anyone playing that defense. There's positives and negatives to take away from this game. The run game didn't look great, but didn't look bad. 69 total yards, couple of touchdowns against a Rams D that, again, is tough to score against. This is not the Tennessee Titans offense we were looking at just a few weeks ago when everyone was healthy. When you have the threat of Henry, of Jones, of Brown, and Tannehill throwing, there is a lot to be worried about when you're a defense. Without Henry, I'm just worried about the Titans. Right now, they're riding high. Best record in the AFC. Great for them. Will they be able to sustain this? That's a lot of adversity to deal with. We'll have to see where it goes. I don't want to take anything away from the Titans. They dominated the Chiefs in this game. Or not the Chiefs, the Rams in this game. And there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You can't make excuses for them. Oh, the Rams did this, the Rams did that. The Titans dominated. Simple. In LA. Simple. As for the Rams, Matthew Stafford's interceptions really killed the team here, because when you look at what the defense did, 194 yards allowed, 3 sacks, and they held the Titans offense to only 14 points. The defense did great. It was really ultimately just the aggressiveness of the Titans defense being able to make those interceptions. One return for a touchdown, one literally set them up I think it was 3 yards away from the line, from the end zone line. I don't know. It was pretty close. Not a ton to really take away positivity wise. Kupp had 11 catches for 95 yards. Wood had 7 for 98. But they're going to have to take a look at their offensive line, I think. Letting the Titans do what they did to them, pretty shocking. This has been a really efficient Rams offense. I'm surprised that they couldn't do more, or that this game wasn't any closer than it was. But there's definitely some questions there for LA. They got a little bit exposed in this game. This is the second time something like this has happened to them. They got blown out by the Cardinals a few weeks ago as well. So some interesting stuff we have to look into for that. But ultimately, again, shout out to the Titans. This was an awesome game to watch as it happened. And, there is a lot of thinking that I'm going to have to do for the power rankings this week. Power rankings video comes out tomorrow. Those are all the games I have to recap for you guys. I appreciate you all for watching. As always, I'm Athan Hristodulu, and remember, email for questions if you guys want to ask anything, see an answer on the show, and the second thing isn't important. But I'll catch you guys tomorrow for a power rankings video. Enjoy the rest of your Monday, everyone, and have a good start to your week.